Chris, can we just talk to Brandon for a second? How much he missed out on Fast X?
I'm glad you.
It
guys
is a
had
pretty
good
fun
time.
movie, Brandon.
I'm glad you guys
Brandon,
had a good time.
I'm as someone who did not like Fast 9 either. Okay, Fast X is pretty good.
Well, I just didn't like the last 3 movies.
I know. I didn't listen. I didn't like Fate of the Furious either. I didn't like Hobbs and Shaw either. This one is actually fun again. This one was actually fun. You know.
Mm-hmm. Not just in a tongue-in-cheek bad way, like actually fun.
I don't think that should matter. I think fun is fun no matter what.
Okay, well.
And I think you're really missing out on one of Jason Momoa's greatest performances. I legitimately think he's really good in this movie.
I did hear that. He was like the best part.
Because he's having fun.
But he knows what movie he's in, but like I've heard like Vin
Exactly.
Diesel doesn't know what movie he's in.
But like I think that's what makes his performance even better, like Jason Momoa's, because it really is a Joker and Batman relationship where Vin Diesel, he's like this stoic guy this whole time, you know? Like Batman, where he's like all serious and stoic, but then Joker's having fun the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good dichotomy. Wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yeah, I agree.
It's
Let's ride.
let's ride. And with that, welcome back to Stacked episode 113. We had a little Fast and Furious talk before the show started.
Ethan is gonna be quiet this episode.
I'm gonna be quiet this episode because I may or may not have received noise complaints.
It was that dog episode you recorded.
Oh. I was pretty rowdy that episode, wasn't I? I was yelling at
Yeah.
Oliver and kicking him off the couch and stuff. But yeah, we're back. This is a very special episode because this is gonna be the last episode for a while where it's the three of us together. Because next week Chris is gonna be going back home to Hong Kong.
Yay!
With his lovely girlfriend Ange. This is the first time you've been home since 2020, right?
Yep, 3 years.
And you're gonna bring the girlfriend. She's gonna see your home. That's so exciting. And so we decided, he has recorded Stacked in Hong Kong when we first started, but like, he's gonna be there with Ange. We want to give him his time home because he hasn't been there a while. So we don't want him to worry about old Stacked. Brandon and I will figure out stuff. And then once I go to Japan for July, Brandon, I hope you know how to edit podcasts. That's all I'll say.
I don't.
I know.
But I've got Final Cut.
Well,
that should help, right?
Yeah, and you can edit the thumbnails too.
I'll figure out
the keys to the city is in your hands, buddy. Don't fuck it up.
Ethan.
Yeah.
I know. You've seen my art skills with Bizarre on my phone. And
you can do it. You can absolutely do it.
I can look up on YouTube how to perfect thumbnails.
Oh, so you're gonna make them better? Okay.
I'm gonna add a circle.
You're gonna add the red arrows, the circle and the red arrows, and you going,
doing a pog face.
And it's gonna be like crossing out like.
I turned into a movie triple feature at 3 a.m. in the morning. Not clickbait, must watch. But yeah, that's just a few housekeeping to get out of the way before we get into this fun show.
That was the big announcement.
I know. I realized that once okay, let's also explain this. That whole announcement bit for like the 2 people that caught on who actually care about this show.
Yeah.
We just made that as a bit. But then I realized that like we kept going on and then there's until there actually was an announcement.
And then
and now we're going on and now we have a hiatus coming.
Yeah.
That is kind of a big announcement.
That is a big announcement.
I'm going to try to keep things going with something.
Me too. In June, I know there's a guest who wants to come on. So Brandon and I, we can tackle that. We'll talk about it after. I'm not going to talk about that live on air. But oh man, I don't know if I want to say this on the podcast because I've literally been holding myself for this for the past 3 years. I have a video essay in progress. Maybe I'll get it out in June. Don't hold me to that. I don't know. Maybe it'll never come out. But I'm like, I've already recorded the video essay. I've edited the first minute of it. Then I hate
making video essays, not because I hate writing them or I hate like the idea of coming up with these like ideas to talk about. I
Pulling
don't like.
footage.
I hate pulling footage.
Oh,
It
it's the
is
worst.
It sucks. It's the worst.
It is
because
the
I
worst
can
part.
edit for days because I got ideas with how to edit things and make them visually interesting, and I know how to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But when it comes to like pulling clean, high definition footage that will make it more watchable,
yeah.
boy
It's
oh boy,
it's like a scavenger hunt, and it's just
Yeah.
like it takes so much time.
and
that's
even
the
if you
process
have
that I'm in right now.
OBS, you have to have like a
You have to let it
high-powered
run.
computer.
Yeah, and then you have to let it run, and then that is definitely the worst part of video essay making, I think, because the writing is fun and the editing is definitely fun,
Yeah.
but pulling footage is like it's the most monotonous thing to do in this process.
Yeah.
Like that's what's been holding me back from like really wanting to jump into the two video essays that I've had in like the pipeline, but like I've never really done anything with,
Right.
which were For Your Name and Top Gun.
Yeah.
But I've just never been like I don't want to like I don't want to set up Top Gun on my computer and let it run for 2.5 hours. You know what I mean?
I know, right? I know. I did that. I mean, I've released teasers for what my video essay is going to be about. It's going to be about the Dark Crystal, and I had to do that. I already like recorded the whole movie. I have that, but then it's just like there's like some other visuals that I need to explain this one certain element, and it's just like fuck. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
All right.
It's also like sorry, quick.
No,
now I'm
last one.
derailing. But
Yeah.
the last point is that I feel like with video essays is a lot like just writing an essay, where it's like the hardest part is getting started.
Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah.
But yeah.
All
All right. Well,
Is this a first aid kit? Getting some band-aids out?
Brandon's hurt.
Yeah, Brandon's
Or
hurt.
is Evelyn hurt?
I bet Brandon hit his head.
Oh, Brandon hurts hips. I hit my head.
Y'all. What?
I did not hit my head.
Oh, sure. Go back to being muted. One time Brandon hit his head, and he came back home with this big-ass band-aid, like a cartoon band-aid on his forehead. And it made me raffle, bro. Okay, let's get to the episode. So, today, this episode is being released the weekend. The highly anticipated sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is coming out. Chris, how excited are you for this? I feel like
I am. I'm a big. I mean, we talked about this. I think even last episode we talked about it, but
yeah,
I'm a big Spiderhead. Yeah. And I grew up with the character and read his comics and the movies and the shows and whatnot. Yeah, I'm really excited. I love the first Spider-Verse movie. I'm just trying to go in to this movie with manageable expectations because like that first movie is fantastic. I think like we all generally really like that movie despite maybe like a couple of things that are detractors.
yeah,
But in general, I feel like it's a very well beloved movie, and I hope that it can surprise me narratively because I mean, animation wise, I've got no worries. I know they're gonna
Yeah.
do great because just the trailers are like beautiful, well done.
yeah,
But like that first one did surprise me with its story. I think it handled it beautifully, and I wasn't expecting that when I went into that movie. So I'm hoping that I can go into this movie with good like manageable expectations, so that it can only surprise me or just satisfy me, and that's fine. Yeah, I'm trying to keep it manageable. I'm trying not to get too in over my head about it. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to check it out. I'm seeing it the night before I fly too. So, it's gonna be a good time. I'm excited.
that's exciting. Brandon, you just got back from playing Hide the Cucumber. What do you think about Spider-Verse?
What a Avengers Age of Ultron's reference that
Yeah.
was.
You know me, buck and a half. I pull out the ones people don't usually talk about.
Buck and a half. I came up with the idea for this, didn't I?
Yeah. No. Yeah, you did.
Because I think because we were talking about when we were thinking about what can we write about this episode.
Yeah.
And we were going over Spider-Verse and we were like, you know what? We have talked about animated films, but nowadays the world is dominated by 3D animation. It's been forever that it feels like that a Western animated 2D movie has like really blown up. Like you've had Klaus on Netflix, comes to
But
mind in my
even
top
then,
five.
that wasn't fully, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, there's this new revitalization of 2D animation that's going on, which is utilizing a 3D space and a character on the 3D spectrum as opposed to
Mhm.
being like flat and 2D. But I think there are things that we can recognize in the 2D medium that is very impressive nonetheless. And there are things with 2D animation you can't do with 3D animation.
Yeah.
And I guess nowadays we've got films like Puss in Boots 2, The Bad Guys, the first two Boss Baby movies,
What?
Spiderverse, Captain Underpants, and the Peanuts movie that have
Yeah.
utilized like a great mixture of 2D and 3D animation at times to
Yeah.
really pervade this like storybook like look that it feels like it's leaping right off the page of something that is 2D. It works
Yeah.
so well for Spider-Verse because it is
Comic book
a comic book,
adaptation. Yeah.
but 2D animation does have its merits. So
It. Oh boy, does
Oh,
it. Yeah. Um.
definitely.
Yeah. Everyone's talking about the quote. I feel like everyone calls it the quote unquote Spider Verse style. That's been really blown up in.
it's just
Uh.
popularized by it, not that it was their idea.
No, it wasn't their idea. It's just yeah, they popularized it. They made it like they put eyes onto it because it was a really good movie.
Yeah, great movie.
And yeah, just like the ability of taking 3D characters and 3D spaces and shading them and playing with frame rate. I feel like frame rate's the biggest uh, point of attraction for these films is realizing that when characters move in a slower frame rate when they're doing intense actions, it sort of like brings a sense uh of power to them, and heavier gravity, which is cool. Um, I'm really excited for the Ninja Turtles movie that's coming out. I'm more excited for the Ninja Turtles movie than I am for the Spider-Verse sequel, if I'm gonna be honest. I just
Fair
I don't
enough.
know. It looks so unique using this ideology that I can't wait. But today we're gonna be going back to uh 2D animated films and like what makes 2D animation so special. So the films that I personally chose were films that I believe could have only been made in the 2D medium and not in the 3D medium. Um, and I also chose uh, films from different countries as well. So I'm only gonna have one American 2D animated film here, and I'm gonna go different countries here. But how did you guys decide like which films you're gonna talk about today to like encapsulate 2D animation?
Well, on my end, it was pretty straightforward. I first thought, well, because of the that we're talking about this movie in preparation for Spider Verse's release, um, I started first thinking about movies that adopt a similar approach to animation as Spider Verse, where it's that blend of 2D and 3D. So I first went with that, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But then I went back and thought about like, okay, what are some just general 2D animated movies that have really touched me in one way or another? And then
Mm-hmm.
that just led me down the rabbit hole from there. Yeah, and like pretty much, my whole intention was to show off some of my favorite 2D animated films, as well as kind of talk about how 2D and 3D have started to get a lot more interplay in these last few years, because I think animators have started looking at that as an advantage to take it, like something to take advantage of, so that they can articulate whatever it is they're trying to articulate
Right.
really well. And Spider Verse does that wonderfully well. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about some of this stuff.
Yeah. What about you, Brandon?
I meant to do it more historically,
Mm-hmm.
so there are a few films that I don't know whether or not I'm going to talk about all of them because now that we have our looser structure, it does feel like sometimes we can talk about more than just three movies.
Yeah.
But historically speaking, I feel like there are three eras distinctly of 2D animation. I think you have your Cell era where it is very like traditional in the animation style, where it feels like they're using it's like pen and paper. And
Right.
then you have your digital, like early digital era where it's combining digital and hand drawn animation. And now I feel like you have this more modern era where they're utilizing 2D animation that is primarily done via like Flash or any other programs. And I think you
Yeah.
get to see like a different source of like shading and a different
Mm.
sort of movement when you see a film that is animated versus by hand versus like by computer. I mean,
Yeah.
not saying like the animators aren't doing work, but it's a different kind of work that's
Different
being done.
process. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right.
So yeah,
Well, since you took a more historical approach, you want to kick us off with your first early animated film, 2D animated film?
right. So first off, I don't think you can quite talk about animation without tackling the mouse.
Yeah.
You
So
gotta.
so I'm picking Sleeping Beauty
Whoa.
Mm.
from which
I'm
when
surprised you're
you
not going for Cinderella.
I thought about it, but if you actually I do want you guys, not just the viewers but my co-hosts, to go and rewatch this movie if you haven't, because it is such a striking style in comparison to the rest of the early Disney features. I think middle Disney, like after Sleeping Beauty, that's when they kind of ran out of the money and they were starting to utilize the same frames and or same uh sense of movement
Oh
for
yeah,
every
they do.
film. Like you can look it up. They're like they have repeated it because people couldn't go back and rewatch these films so easily. So how would they notice?
Right.
Now having access to every Disney film, it's so easy to notice these frames are similar. But if you look at Sleeping Beauty, there is something entirely magical about the way this film is animated.
Yeah.
Because yes, it may not have the best Disney princess story, but it has a fantastic villain. It's got an evocative setting of like this dark fairy tale world that is very Gendy, Tartakovsky. That his name? What's
Yeah,
his
that's
name?
his name. Yeah, Gendy
Yeah,
Tartakovsky. But the person you got to contribute this all to, one of my favorite background artists of all time.
right,
She changed the look of Disney. It's Mary Blair. She's
right.
the background artist for this film. Did you guys ever go to the exhibit that they had at Chapman for her works of art?
I don't
It
think
was at
so.
it was
Was
at
it
I
that
don't
at
think
the
so.
museum.
Hilbert?
At the Hilbert. It was at the Hilbert. I remember I went there, and I just think her style is enchanting, and it's just
It
like
is.
it defined the look to like Fantasyland at Disneyland.
Right. And it feels like they ripped exactly that aesthetic and brought it to this. And it doesn't feel flat. Like, noticeably,
No.
yes, it is like you can obviously tell it's 2D animated by the way the
Yeah.
trees look. It's like very geometric almost in the way it's structured, but that doesn't make it like any less like, oh, I'm watching a movie. This feels fake and flat and empty, because there's a way that things are shaded and the way that things are structured that makes it really. I don't know the quite the word, but you say enchanting, so like let's go with that.
Yeah.
And the characters feel real, and it just feels so unique and stylistically different from a lot of Disney films of the era, which kind of they don't feel like, they almost feel more bare bones than this one. And I think that's
Right.
because of the detail that Mary Blair has kind of represented in this film.
Yeah. It's very I feel like she has a very northern eastern European style to it, which is, I mean, when you think of fairy tales, like that's where it all originated, is from that part of the of Europe, so I I've been meaning to go back and just check out all the Disney classics from the vault. I rewatched Bambi recently. I rewatched Pinocchio. Briefly, I didn't rewatch the whole film. Sasha was watching it back when I lived with Sasha, and I rewatched Alice in Wonderland, which was like I thought that film was great. Um, so I just want to go back and see all these classic Disney animated films that like made this studio such a the powerhouse that it is today.
I think
Hmm.
I think I need to rewatch Fantasia because I haven't watched that movie since I was like a kid, like a little
Oh
kid.
yeah,
And I remember there are certain sequences that, as somebody who was like, I, when I watched animated films as a kid, I never like picked up on like themes and story, but I was trying to. And this movie doesn't really have one. So that
Okay.
movie kind of like it's striking in its visuals, but it's obviously meant to evoke uh the juxtaposition between what you hear and what you see.
It's a formless film because
Right.
that's basically what it was made for. Like, I think they talked about it in our animated film class, right, Brandon, where they made Fantasia just to show, um, just how like powerful. Wait, were you in my
I
animated film
wasn't.
class? I don't know why I said I thought you were. You were in
I,
most of my other classes.
I mean, I've
However.
seen a lot of animation, so
Yeah, but
it's fair
in
to
that
assume.
class that I took, it was like Fantasia was made just because the animators just wanted to show like their audience of what they're capable of, you know. So they're like, let's make a story with no, let's make a movie with no story, and it's just like you're going to the opera, you know, or you're going to go to the ballet, but it's performance through animation, you know. And that's I feel like that's a completely valid thing, you know. It's I love me some formless filmmaking, you know, in that sense. Um, but yeah, I feel like you can also pick up that in Sleeping Beauty. I haven't seen this since probably when I had it on VHS when I was like 3 or 4 years old. Probably been that long, so
Same.
I can't tell you anything that's happened in that movie. You know, besides uh, Maleficent turns into the dragon at the end. That dragon that just famously caught on fire. Did you guys see that?
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just
And then
burst into
and then
flames.
did you see the shot of like because like there's a lot of people recording it. There's
Yeah.
someone got a video of the Mickey actor
Yeah.
like looking up at the fire and then just standing on a platform and just descending below the stage, just like piecing out.
See it.
Yeah, he's like, I did that. Even though...
Yeah, that was me. What a mic drop. But yeah, I don't really remember much of the story. You know, I know
No,
there's
me
the
neither.
3 fairy godmothers too.
They are kind of the protagonists of the movie, which is really interesting. But the thing about Aurora is she's kind of a weak Disney princess, just
Yeah.
because she's asleep.
She's sleeping the whole time.
75% of the movie, and then
Actually,
Yeah.
she's most relatable in that sense.
and then 10% of the like time she's
True.
like she doesn't really do anything when she is awake. So it's very much like the prince is well developed and the villain is well developed, but the fairy godmothers have to carry the movie, and mileage may vary because I don't really like them all that much.
Hmm.
Damn, you heard it here
But the
first,
movie's good.
folks.
Movie's
Yeah.
good though.
Yeah.
Well,
I feel the same way about Sleeping Beauty as I do a lot of those early Disney films, in the sense that I remember like when I was in high school, I like did your guys' school ever host that like TED Talk thing? TED Ed, is that what they called it?
No,
we'd
why-
we'd
our
watch
ho-
them. We'd watch
yeah,
them.
but we never host them.
Well, like it wasn't a real TED Talk. It's basically like a program that whoever runs TED Talk runs,
Ted.
where like they go to schools and Mr. Ted,
No,
the
from
bear,
the movie
Seth
Ted.
MacFarlane's bear from the movie Ted. But like anyway, so basically there was like a TED Talk, an amateur TED Talk, basically at my school,
Yeah.
and it was run by students, and one of the students talked about the representation of women in these Disney films and how they have changed and progressed as time has gone on to match, how the kind of like social climate, if you will.
Right.
And a lot of these earlier Disney films, like the princesses are not incredibly engaging characters. Like even like Snow, like Snow White, I think like Brandon, I saw on Twitter, you tweeted towards, you replied to Rachel Zegler or some shit. By the way, love Snow White.
And she responded. Not to me, but she responded to the tweet after. But I was the only person that tagged her, and I was like, I wonder if she saw.
Oh,
Yeah.
No.
But more to the point, like, yeah, a lot of these early Disney films, like, don't like the representation of women is not nearly as flattering compared by modern standards of how women are represented in Disney films. Like, I mean, nowadays you have like a lot of the princesses are much more active and like, usually have much more developed backstories and character arcs. Like nowadays you have, say, I mean, Elsa's one of the biggest ones. Rapunzel is huge. Moana,
She's one of my
Mulan,
favorites.
Mulan's number one for me, man.
I think it wasn't until Mulan, and Belle is one of my favorite Disney princesses, but like it wasn't until Mulan that those princess movies started to like give their princesses like action.
Like
They were
agency,
smart.
yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have agency. It's like you can look at Ariel and Jasmine and Belle as genuine step ups from Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, the like. But they didn't really do much in their stories, and at times they're at the will of whoever is like who else is
The prince, probably.
Yeah,
Usually.
usually, yeah. Whereas like when you look at Mulan, it's like that's the first one where it's like, okay, there's some independence here. So those early ones are kind of deceptively like, oh, a step forward, but also kind of regressive. But it wasn't until like the late 90s that I think we have stepped into a new era.
True.
Yeah, which was the Disney Renaissance, which
Exactly.
I don't know about you guys, but it's still my favorite era of Disney.
It's up there.
I don't know about you guys.
It's better than the Silver Age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brandon, who's your favorite Disney princess? Chris said his was Mulan. Who's
Tiana.
yours?
Mulan.
Tiana's up there for
Tiana.
me. She's a pretty good.
Tiana's
She's
pretty
great.
sick.
She's enterprising. She's independent. She's smart. It's
She's
just
funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's very funny. And then Belle is like a bookworm.
She's got
and
good
she's
songs
sweet.
too.
But yeah, they
yeah,
both
good
got
songs,
good
good music.
songs. So
Yeah.
that's what makes a good Disney princess.
True. Got to analyze them.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. I'm glad
Yeah.
we started a bit earlier. Chris, do you have one you want to jump off of?
Sure. I mean, we were just talking about Mulan, so I guess I'll jump around a bit. I want to bring in I guess from the same era as Mulan, since we were just briefly talking about that. And we watched this movie for a movie night a little while ago. I want to talk about Tarzan.
Oh yes.
Now this is a great movie.
Oh.
So
Came out. The year
I mean,
we were
everybody.
born.
Yeah, the year we were born. Jesus Christ. But yeah, okay. So Tarzan. I mean, everyone knows the story. Like washed ashore. Child gets taken in by a pack of gorillas and basically like assimilates into their culture, and then is kind of confronted by his true heritage and kind of has to go about that. Yeah, Tarzan is a beautifully animated film. I think one thing that really stands out to me about this film, especially for its time, is how detailed its foliage is. And like the matte backgrounds for like all of the characters is like impeccably detailed. It all feels very like stylized, but like not overly stylized. And like combine that with as well as the music by Phil Collins, which still some of the best music I've seen Disney put into one of their animated works.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. It's just phenomenal. And on top of that, it's a very well handled and mature take on a pretty standard story. You know what I mean? Like the end, like the part in the film where like just Tarzan's struggle between these two worlds. The song "Two Worlds, One Family."
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And it's deeply compelling, and like there's a lot of these little moments where like for example, there's this great scene in the movie where Tarzan and his gorilla mother, I should say, go back to the treehouse, and it's him making the decision of like, do I stay here or do I go with the humans?
Right.
And there's a great shot where she's outside of the treehouse and she sees his silhouette coming out, and it looks like it looks like, just because of the way it's shaded and whatnot, like he's shirtless and walking out, and then he emerges in a suit, and it's just like that's just simple visual storytelling, and I don't know, the 2D animation is just beautiful in this. This is one of those movies that you could put on and I'll never complain about it. Yeah, I love Tarzan. And Ethan, you were shocked by how much you like this movie.
I probably hadn't seen Tarzan since when I watched Sleeping Beauty. Like it's been that long since, but then when we watched it together, it was like, it's so fun. It's such a fun movie. This is also one of the first Disney films after Beauty and the Beast, right? To use 3D backgrounds, to use 3D animation, blend 3D and 2D, and just like Beauty and the Beast, it has it's aged phenomenally. When you see, there's a lot of films where you see 3D objects interact in a 2D space in animated films, and it doesn't look good.
They touched on it in Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, but I think they sort of perfected it in Mulan and Tarzan.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
and that's great to see that, like, because the thing about 2D animation is it's always timeless, because there's no sort of breakthroughs in textures and technology, you know.
Yeah. It's
It's
just it's pure technique.
like Snow White looks just as good today as it did in the 40s,
You upscale that to 4K and it
or the
still
30s,
looks
really.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it still looks great. And thankfully, when Disney started using 3D spaces in their 2D films, they did it appropriately for it to still look great.
Mhm.
Yeah, this film's fantastic. Great story, great humor. The soundtrack is probably Disney's best. The songs, 'cause our boy Phil, he rocks it.
It's okay.
What? Wait, what? I thought you loved it too.
But you like the music.
It's
No,
okay.
I do like Tarzan's music, but it's something that when I listen to Phil Collins, it becomes more grating the more I listen to it. In the moment, it's great. But then if I hear the song again and again, I'm kind of over it by the
Dude,
second
In
time.
the Air Tonight will always be one of the all-time
Bro,
greats. I can throw that
you'll
song
be
on
in my heart.
Ever.
You'll be in my heart always gets me. That song, oh man.
He's a
Oh,
soulful
golly.
dude. He's good. He's good. All right,
It's
I'm
more
gonna keep.
memeable than it is good.
No, you're a troll. You're a troll. I'm blocking you. Well, I'm done with this conversation. I'm gonna keep going on the Disney train, and I'm gonna talk about my Disney movie that I made. No, my favorite Disney 2D film, and that is The Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah,
This
this
is
movie's
underrated.
hilarious.
It's
It's
the
so
most
funny.
underrated Disney film. This is a Renaissance film, right? It came out
Yes,
2000.
it is Renaissance film. 90s, I think.
I don't think
Uh,
so.
It was the
Is it not Renaissance?
it,
I
it
think
was
it
the
is.
year
or
after
just
Tarzan.
post-
2000 came out 2000.
I
Yeah,
don't think
let me
so.
double check this. Disney Renaissance.
Anyways, while Chris is checking that, this is the Disney film I was raised on. Like, just I think it's the funniest one because it's not a musical. It's like it's a straight up comedy.
It's-
You know.
It's in the era just following the Renaissance.
That's what I
Oh.
would say.
Okay.
But I would argue
Know your history.
I'd be willing to put it in the Renaissance era for my personal
Me too.
taste.
I'm gonna
I think
put
this
it
movie's
there
fun.
on my own, and I'm
I
gonna
would not
convince
put it-
everyone to do the same,
Can I
just to spite you.
can I say something?
Sure.
I don't think it belongs in the Renaissance era
Why?
because it's so okay. If you look at the Renaissance era of Disney films, they're all, with the exception of The Rescuers Down Under, they're all pretty much the same. They're Broadway style musicals with a great classic story being revitalized by Disney animation. And when you look at the post Renaissance, which includes the works like Lilo and Stitch, Dinosaur, Emperor's New Groove, Treasure Planet, Meet the Robinsons, these are all more risky ideas, and they're not traditional. Just because they're not in the Renaissance era doesn't mean they're good movies. It just means they're more risky and groundbreaking in their attempts and approaches.
Yeah.
And I think Emperor's New Groove is brave because it wasn't going to be the film that it was. I actually watched a video essay on Emperor's New Groove
Tell us about it. What was it gonna be?
So initially Disney had a similar idea to make the film. It wasn't going to be like Cusco as like this likable figure who was like learning to love. It was going to be more of like a traditional Disney musical with like the same with the same structure as those Renaissance movies, but it got butchered in development, and I don't remember why. If I can find the video, I can have you link it in the description.
Yeah.
But it was not going to be the film that it ended up being, and that's why it came out after the Renaissance. So I think that's part of the reason, because it's more stylistically risky that if you look at it as opposed to like what they had produced in the Renaissance era.
Right. Because it's a incredibly loose adaptation of a classic story, The Emperor's New Clothes. But, uh, I think the connection sort of stopped there in the title because he's not naked; he's a llama. But I just think this movie is like one of the most quotable Disney movies. Sharp Rocks to the Bomb. Oh yeah, bring it on. Or A Pacha. And Kronk, of course, one of the best Disney characters ever. He's so good.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
Oh yeah, it's all come together now.
Dude, the
Cusco's
wrong
poison.
lever
Poison
thing
Cusco.
it never fails to make me laugh.
The what?
Wrong lever thing.
Oh yeah, pull the lever, Kronk! Wrong lever! Or when he's doing his own theme music. It's so good. And it introduced me to talents such as John Goodman. This might have been my first John Goodman movie. Was him as Pacha. David Spade as Cusco. It's our first Disney Prince movie that stars a Disney prince, Which as a man, I felt very validated in that.
That is not
I said
true.
I said finally, one for the boys.
That's not true.
I know, Lion King.
And
Lion King's
no,
one.
Aladdin, Lion King, and Hercules.
No. He's not a prince. Hercules isn't a prince.
Okay.
He's a demigod.
He becomes a prince at the end. Aladdin does.
Oh yeah.
He marries Jasmine.
Yeah, but this one was the first one. So, anyways, yeah, it's a really good movie. I'm gonna deny all of Brandon's facts that he tells me.
Even though they're right.
Yeah, ever since, never mind. Yeah, I just don't believe anything Brandon says anymore. Even when they're correct.
Well,
And that's just how it goes now.
that's insane, cuz.
Cuz? Yeah, it is insane. I'm insane. Have you not understood that by now? I'm freaking
That's
crazy.
insane, cuz.
I'm freaking out of my mind, dude. I'm
Forget
crazy.
about it, cuh.
I said forget about it, cuh. But yeah, anyone else have any thoughts on Emperor's New Groove, Brandon?
I like the movie a lot. I think it is one of the... I remember watching it a lot as a kid. I don't... this is like right before I started going to the theater as a kid to watch movies. But I remember specifically rewatching the DVD a lot.
Oh yeah,
So I don't know. I really liked it.
it's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, are we out of our Disney? Is it?
I think we're
Sorry.
done.
I'm pretty much
done.
done with Disney, I think. Yeah. I
Cool.
think I'm done
Done.
with Disney.
Get out of
Done.
here.
We are done with Disney. We said our piece. Get out of here. Let's get into some more unique films. Brandon, what do you got?
Still picking a Western animated film. I'm picking a Brad Bird movie. I'm thinking The Iron Giant.
Hey! Great movie. Love this movie.
Classic.
Brilliant movie. We saw this movie in a theater.
We did with Brad
I'm
Bird.
jealous.
He was there.
Yeah, I wasn't invited. Cool.
Oh, you weren't there?
Oh, you weren't there.
No, I wasn't invited
Oh.
too. So
Sorry.
it's okay, guys. It's
It was so fun.
I know you guys probably had a great time, but I was probably doing something cooler. I don't know, like dude. I don't
This
know,
movie
like
bombed
backflips
at the
or
box
something.
office, and I think I know the reason why. I think
Why?
this is because it's like the late 90s, early 2000s. This is the transition from the traditional animation to computer animation. And this is a film that utilizes both, It's one of those films like Tarzan that learns how to effectively mix both mediums from Warner Brothers, but it bombed because what was popular at the time? Look at what Disney was putting out. They were trying to put out
Toy Story.
Dinosaur,
Toy Story.
Exactly. Pixar was putting out Toy Story before they merged with Disney. And it was like nobody wanted to watch 2D animated features, especially ones that are like not fantastical. If you look at those Disney movies of the Renaissance era that were making boatloads of money, that were getting awards consideration, that was all the Broadway musicals. So then when you get something that is like about nuclear fear and about like the Cold War and about it's a coming of age story about like a kid in the 1950s, like who's gonna like
it's not a great pitch, what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean it's like The Rocketeer and how those two movies have kind of like picking up their cult classic status from their like retro futuristic approach to to viewing science fiction.
Hmm.
And it's so classic, it has like the prestige of a classic movie. Even if you watched it in like 2000, it feels like a classic movie.
It does.
And,
Yeah,
I remember watching it and falling in love with the characters and in this world, and it has some of the most delicious looking food. And
Bro,
shake.
that milkshake got laxatives in it. I'll still drink it. It looks so
Even if you
good.
shit your brains out.
Yeah.
I don't care. That shit
And
looks too good.
And the coloring is straight out of like a live action film. It feels
Oh,
like
it's
so
so
layered.
pretty.
Like it feels
Yeah.
like a Spielberg movie.
It does. He lights horizons just like Close Encounters, which is like insane.
It's gorgeous.
You know,
And it's just so detailed. Chris, go ahead.
No, yeah, the movie is so beautifully done, and like we've been talking about the whole like blending 2D and 3D, and this movie does it really well. Like I'm sure there's many sequences, but I think where it becomes its most apparent is when, and I think I think Iron Giant does this the best out of. I'm sure there's maybe other movies out there that I could talk about, but for this one, like I think they do a really good job of knowing when to use 2D and 3D well for narrative purposes too. Because, for instance, if I remember correctly, like even like the Iron Giant is 2D, but then when the military comes in with the explosions and all that shit, it gives the 3D look of that lends it almost like an aggressive kind of texture to it. You know what I mean? Which contrasts heavily with like the kind of peaceful harmony that the 2D look brought to the film initially, which is just like that's just smart use of your techniques, and I love that about it. And like Brandon said, the movie is also so beautifully like it's one of those movies that like you can watch and just like you feel warm inside. You know what I mean? And even though the ending is kind of tragic in its own way, but also kind of uplifting too, because there's a little hint at like there's hope. There's something so like just like a nice warm blanket kind of movie. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, when I was a kid, I thought this was a Spielberg movie because that's how
it feels like it.
Because it feels like it, and it's very similar to E.T. In terms of its structure.
Yeah,
it's boy and alien, but this time the alien's huge. And
a robot.
But it's pretty similar. But Brad Bird is able to make it unique as itself on its own just by using the aesthetics of sort of the Dean Fleischer era of like the Superman cartoons from the 50s and 40s,
It feels like a vintage action comic for sure.
It does. Yeah,
and they make reference to that.
It's very pulp comic book like,
Yeah.
And there's never been another movie since it,
Never a movie. Not one.
Not one. Not movie.
Not even
like,
The Terminal.
No movie. It was the last movie that came out. We've been starving for years, guys. Like, release a movie. Come on. Like, you got more ideas, right? Imagine they stop making movies after this. We're just like, hey, come on.
This one bombed so bad. Like,
yeah, they're like, they gave up. Like, this is one of the greatest movies ever made. No one's gonna see this. That it's hopeless. Maybe they should have done that. I don't know. Anyways, it's a great film. Iron Giant. Chris, you got one? You want to talk about?
I do. I'll. You know what? It'd be I feel like, and I'm sure we all probably brought one to the table. Yeah, but I think it'd be crazy if we didn't talk about Japanese animation.
Is it anime time? All right, let's get into anime time.
Okay. I mean, the two that stood out to me, and like that stood out to me the most were Grave of Fireflies and End of Eva.
Really? I'm shocked you didn't think of your name as like.
I would have, but I want to talk about Suzume later. We'll come back to that.
Oh.
Because we haven't done a Suzume debrief, which, by the way, everyone if you're listening, go watch Suzume. But okay, so Grave of Fireflies. I'll start there because I bet Ethan's gonna want to talk about NGE. Grave of Fireflies. I've talked about this movie a couple of times before, but this movie is one of those films that like I felt like when I watched it, I remember it transcended the form itself. I've never felt the kind of like despair. Maybe I'm trying to think of other movies that have made me feel this so sad about the world. And probably the only one I can think of that compares to this movie in terms of its tragedy and its story.
Schindler.
Probably Schindler.
Yeah.
Just how like depressing it is over. And like but I gotta say, like, it is a beautifully animated film, and I love the way they make use of the medium to tell its story. There's an old, I think I've said this before, but there's like an old, like DA. I've heard this like DA people talk about this, and I agree that when you're making an animated film, you have to be able to justify why animation is the right medium for this story.
Yes.
And I think Grave of Fireflies cannot be done in live action.
No.
Especially once you kind of get to contextualize what's going on in this story. Just like the fantastical elements in this film, and albeit pretty limited, are contrasted so brutally against this devastating setting that it's set against. And the animation just swells beautifully between those two aspects of like that grounded realism versus that fantastical surrealism almost. Maybe not surreal might not be the right word, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. And like we said earlier about Iron Giant, Grave of Fireflies is one of those movies that makes you fall in love with its characters. It's a very simple movie, but once you kind of get into the like what's going on here, the characters are so empathetic. You can really feel yourself like latching onto them. And it's one of those movies that like, I don't know, it just speaks to me in a way that like really left an impression on me. Ethan, I know you're a big fan of this movie, just like me. Brandon, I know you like this movie, not as much as me and Ethan, but like nonetheless, like I know you respect this movie.
It's too sad.
I can say that.
It's too sad. That's his complaint. It's too sad.
I also hate the dub. I've only ever watched.
You've only watched yeah. What?
Because it's the one that was easily accessible when I watched it, and I think it's a movie that it's obvious in what it's going for, and that obviousness is like so bleak, and it's like I wish it would like do something else, like in addition to what it is, which is just kids walking and talking and going through the most devastating period of their life socioculturally.
It's just that. Show me something else.
No,
put something else on.
That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean.
Oh, they're starving to death, huh? Yeah. Next, come on, put something cool in here. Too sad.
It's a well-made movie, and I will say the animation, there's a texture to it that is impeccable. The way they do shadows in this movie, and the way like the actual fireflies in the movie like shine and light up the environment that they're in. It is very haunting, and I think they know how to evoke that feeling of just soul-sucking, devastating trauma. Yeah, I don't know. I love the animation.
Gorgeous animation. One of Ghibli's best animated films. Chris, going back to your point of just like, what is the point of this being an animated film, right? I think there are two films you can relate this to. We already said Schindler's List, which I agree, and Come and See. I would say is also another one that comes to this one. And what all of these three films have in common is people experiencing the absolute worst in humanity, the absolute hell, and the feats that Spielberg made and that the film Come and See made is damn near impossible, so it makes sense. And this one is entirely focused on two kids, so you could not direct children to emote the way they do in this film, physically. You can't get a kid you can't starve a kid. You can't show a kid that looks like when they're on the brink of death starving.
Watch me.
All right.
Auteur Brandon enters the
Starving Kid movie coming to theaters 2025. Everyone get ready. It's going to be great.
It's 8 hours long.
Yeah.
It's a wonder. It's a one take.
But also, I think this movie is also very layered in showing this. It shows the first-hand effects of war in the beginning. When they visit their mother after the fire bombings.
The raid, yeah.
But then the rest of the film is more secondhand. It's more of them grappling with the fallout of this war and having to be on their own and just willing to survive. Because the war itself is not a danger to these characters for most of the movie. It's
No,
just
it's not.
It's the fallout of the
it's
war.
the fallout. It's
and,
just living on their
yeah.
own with no money and figuring out what to do with no parents or no family and no direction. You know. And Brandon, yeah, he thinks that's a lullaby to him. He's already sleeping. He's passed out by the time they get around to the. I can't believe you. You have to rewatch. Brandon, you're watching all your top 100 films. Rewatch that one. Will you
That's
do that
not
for
in
me,
my
please?
top 100.
I know, but it will be. It will be once you
Yeah.
rewatch it and it's correct language. And now you're a lot smarter than the first time you watched it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. See,
Backhanded fucking compliment, but I'll take it.
yeah, you're welcome, man. Hey, anytime. But yeah, great film. Okay, I actually wasn't gonna talk about End of Eva this episode. That wasn't
really?
gonna be my
Okay.
anime, but I'm willing to talk about it. Okay, I'm just gonna I'll talk about it. But I want to briefly bring up the anime that I was gonna bring up instead, which was I feel like you can't talk about 2D animation without bringing up the master Satoshi Kon. I was gonna bring up one of my favorite films of all time, my favorite film of his, Perfect Blue, which is about subjectivity, experiencing reality, and using 2D animation as a medium for the director to be complete control of the frame, hence being able to play with how people experience reality differently. I think that's really awesome. And it just makes me super jazzed. It was actually going to be the film that I wanted to do my thesis on, but it wasn't on that list, so I chose Totoro instead. But I went with the same thesis. But End of Evangelion. All right. Let's get into this one. I think it actually goes into a similar exercise that Satoshi Kon does, where Hideki Anno basically he's expressing this insanely complex struggle that we as social creatures all go through, which is the struggle with not knowing what the other person is thinking and the insecurities that come from that, the conflicts that come from that, the lack of self empathy and self-love that comes from that, and the problems that creates. That's what all of End of Evangelion is about. It's about all these issues being allegorized. Is that the word? I don't know. As an allegory.
Turned into an allegory.
Turned into an allegory of a world-ending event. Put into the hands of one of the most insecure teenage boys to ever live. And the exercises that Hideki Anno goes through by using animation, is just incredible. I remember the first time I watched this film. Oh man, I was such a baby. What was this? It was like November of 2020. This film literally changed my life. It changed my life, I feel. And that's why it's my favorite film ever made. That's why if I were to subscribe to anything as a religious text, I would bring my giant $300 collector's edition of Neon Genesis Evangelion, because I think it taught me more about how I see myself and see the world around me than any sort of text or lesson I've ever received in my life. And it only could have been done through the use of animation and 2D animation.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't even talked about how high quality the animation is in this film. Just how fluid. It blows my mind thinking about how these animators animated that fight between Asuka and the Eva series, and how you see the giant robots swing these big swords, fall to the ground, split these robots in half. Just how fluid the motion is something you don't expect from 2D animation, but they did it, and it's spectacular. It is some of the best action I've ever seen put to film, and it's entirely drawn, which blows my mind. All right, I'm gonna stop talking about this film because I could talk about it for hours. Brandon, I listen. It's also so extremely validating that every person who I've shown this film to or recommended to is also given it 5 stars. That just makes me feel like I'm doing something right. Because I remember showing Brandon this, and I just remember we were both on our little Santa hats. It was towards Christmas time, and we were watching.
We did it over
We did it over Discord.
Zoom.
I remember.
Or yeah.
Yeah. What did you think, Brandon?
I love this movie. It's a great encapsulation of the end of the series. I think it caps off every storyline well, and I think thematically it has a lot to say about self-worth. And it's less indulgent than I think a lot of people say about the series as a whole. Often people say the first half is really fun, it's light, it's like nothing.
Yeah.
It's just to endear us to the characters, and then the second half is so self-indulgent, and I don't think I hear that. I hear people don't like the second half of the series, but I'm like, it to me, it's taking risks.
That's and actually for me, that's where I really tuned in.
Right, exactly.
And then Chris, if you rewatch the series, it's gonna make the first half all the stronger because now you're like, oh, the first half was building up these characters so they could tear them down.
There are little moments too.
Yeah.
In the first half that really visually actually convey a parallel between the beginning and the end of their stories. And I think the rebuilds do a good job at like telling the meta story behind why I think people don't like the series.
Yeah.
But I think the second half of the series mixed with the end of Evangelion is just so devastating. But also very cathartic in a way. The way it goes out.
Oh my god.
But I adore this movie. It's in my top 100. I'll be rewatching it eventually.
I've seen it so many times, and it's really just a Rorschach test of like where you are in your life and how. I'm gonna rewatch it soon. I might rewatch it in June before I head off to Japan, and go to Eva in real life. Guys, I'm gonna be hearing those cicadas in real life. Oh wait, that's just not the soundtrack of the show. That's actually that plays everywhere in Japan. Chris, what about you?
Oh man, I still remember when you guys showed me this movie.
Yeah.
So I remember I was watching the show for like maybe 2 months, just slowly make my way through it. And I remember, was it episode 16 when it really that's when it kicks off?
Yeah.
And that's the episode. Yeah, and then by that point is when I'm like, oh. And then from there going towards episode 24, 25, something like that. It just keeps building towards this unbelievable climax. And by the time I finally saw it, this movie, I mean, the whole show, but the movie itself, really helped contextualize everything for me. And all the things about, like you guys said, about self-worth, but also even beyond that, I found it incredibly deep about how it discusses philosophical nihilism, religious studies, the effect family has upon you, mother's relationship to children, father's relationship to sons. That's really important in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Human psychoanalysis and all this. And I was primed to love this movie because I took Fury's classes. Because I was like, my God, I don't think I would understand this movie without really kind of diving into all these other aspects of humanity, and just how it kind of I've said this before, but I am truly in awe of how they're able to bring in all of these unbelievably vast concepts, which even just tackling one of those is difficult enough in a film, let alone a bunch of them, and grounding it in the story of a bunch of teenagers fighting these mysterious creatures from the skies. But and when you pitch that to someone, you're like, what fuck are you smoking out there?
It's a manga then it's anime? What? Okay.
And then it's also this deep existential film about personhood but also your role in the universe.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just it's about everything. You know what I mean? And truthfully it didn't leave it's one of those movies that I have nothing but love and respect for. It just didn't leave as strong of an emotional impact on me because I think other films may have filled that void for me in other places.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, the movie is brilliant. I one of those. It's one of those movies where even when I give a movie 5 stars, sometimes I'm like, oh, one or two things I'd like to change. 0 notes for this movie.
No
notes.
Not
Not a no insight. The ending when they cut to all that footage of, I think, just streets of Japan and then the theater at the end.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, like the spectator shit, like you're speaking my language, you know what I mean?
know, dude. Oh my god.
Yeah. And it's like it's like I honestly think I could probably pull a chapter from any of our film studies textbooks and apply it to this movie.
Yes.
And honestly, I'm having trouble thinking of one other than like maybe like black cinema or something.
Yeah, intersectionality.
But yeah, you know what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
brilliant. And also like, you know, the point we're talking about, animation is beautiful all around. Can't complain. The final like shots of like the planet with all of the
Crosses,
you know, floating in the sky.
For lack of a better word, to be honest.
Yeah. I don't even know what to describe that. Yeah, it's one of the movies that leaves you kind of speechless because it's hard to comprehend, but it's like it's all there. And yeah. We're going on an hour here. Do you guys have anything you want to throw in?
Brandon, did you have an anime? Yeah, what's your
Silent
anime?
Voice.
Oh, great movie.
Great movie.
Because
people can change, man.
I'm not a piece of shit. People can change.
I used to be.
I used to be, but I'm not a piece of shit.
I'm always like, everybody's like, okay, like animation. And Chris, you said it before. What about this movie needs to be animated? Because it is a film that doesn't really have any fantastical elements in terms of its storytelling. It's about bullying. And
bullying.
It's simple.
Bullying. And it's pure and simple. But I think there's such a effective way in capturing melodrama in the way the film is animated via how it's subjectivity again, with which Ethan talks about, and how somebody sees the world and how their perception of the world shifts based on their interactions they have with other people.
Yeah.
And that is somebody trying to make up for their own mistakes, like the main character in this movie. He sees himself as closed off from everybody around him because as a kid, he was dealing with his own trauma through bullying other people. And it's a really strongly affecting movie emotionally, and one that I think is it's so sweet. And when it's at first they're sour, then they're sweet, you know. Whenever we watch a movie like this, you don't want to empathize or sympathize for a protagonist that is like truly an awful person at the beginning.
Yeah.
But the fact that they can change, and you're enthralled by that change that you see in somebody, and that the animation is like, it's real, but it's hard to like describe how special it is. I don't know if you guys have any words, because I really don't on this front.
I think you hit the nail on the head where anime and melodrama, they go together like this.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh my god.
Because anime knows how to heighten subjectivity and reality in a way that makes it feel like action, where you're as thrilled about that as you're seeing an action sequence, you know?
Yeah.
And I just remember, like, the end of this movie killed me during the fireworks. Oh my god. And just the tension that film's able to build through animation, you know? It's intense. And people can change. You know?
Yeah.
It's great.
No, yeah. I love what you said, Ethan, about how anime and melodrama go hand in hand with one another, because I think one thing that anime does really well, and I think just animation in general, but anime especially, is expressivity. It's so potent. It's so like vibrant, you know what I mean? And that works so beautifully for melodrama, because melodrama as a genre operates in a mode of emotional bigness, you know what I mean? And it's all about coming out and like showing out, you know what I mean? And this movie does this movie almost you really hate the main character in the beginning of this movie.
Yeah.
But and like, oh my god, like I was like, I can't imagine you redeeming this guy. But the thing I find interesting about it is that he's not really redeemed. It's more like reconciled.
Forgiven?
You know what I mean? Like, maybe forgiven and given the opportunity to, you know, grow and become better. But you don't by the end of the movie, I've never been like, oh, he was great all along. No, the guy was a piece of shit, and he knows it.
Yeah.
It was.
And the
I
movie,
said
yeah, and the
was.
movie.
Yes, I was.
I said I was a piece of shit. Yeah, and like, I don't know, it's a movie that, like, more than anything is about like choosing love over hate, which, like, I mean, come on, man, like, simple as that, and I love it. I think it's beautiful, and it touches on a lot of things that I think are very prevalent aspects of modern youth culture, whether it be depression, anxiety, suicide, and like all these awful things that I think a lot of people in our generation are being faced with. And I think it does a really good job of articulating that in this very grounded way. And yeah, I think it's gorgeous. Great choice.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, should we run just through some honorable mentions of ones
I'd
we
love
didn't get
to.
to? I want to talk about the one other film that I didn't get to. It's Hungarian.
Yeah.
Son of the White Mare
Yeah.
is an ethereal 2D animated film in having to like able to capture the gravitas of ancient folklore in a cinematic medium is amazing. And then of course a director that was inspired by Eastern European animation. We already talked about Evgeny Tarkovsky. I want to talk about Samurai Jack, the premiere movie. Well, I don't think it's basically, this was the premiere of the show that was released in theaters, in select theaters, and it's just the first few episodes of the show. I think there are episodes that are stronger in the series, and it's one of my favorite shows of all time. But it's able to show how the power of animation, of what you can do with style and setting, using a sort of Sergio Leone setting, but in like Sergio Leone style, a heightened hyperbolized Sergio Leone style in like a in like a Blade Runner setting, and it's so cool. Let's see what else. You guys want to shout some more? I'm gonna pull up some more.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to go first, Brandon?
It's up to you.
You go first.
Okay. So I want to note early Don Bluth animation, stuff that we kind of forget about because of Disney Renaissance. I got Land Before Time.
That was one of mine.
I was gonna say Quest for Camelot as well. Very underrated film.
Oh man, I haven't seen that forever, bro.
Yeah. Very underrated.
That's a throwback right there.
I think if we're talking stick figures, It's Such a Beautiful Day, a great Don Hertzfeldt movie. Color wise, I think animation is very expressive in the coloring of its films and shading, and I would say like something like Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, the SpongeBob movie, Curious George. Yeah, very good. We got rotoscoping 2D animation from Linklater.
Yeah.
So you've got films like Scanner Darkly, Apollo 10.5, Not Waking Life.
What? Fuck you.
Don't like that movie.
It's the best one.
Ernest and Celestine's a great little French film about like animals like that are like, it's kind of like a predecessor to Utopia in a way, or Zootopia. Very sweet. And then got two more. Loving Vincent, great watercolor animation that is in the vein of his paintings, his artwork, and Wolfwalkers, which was a few years ago nominated for Best Animated Feature. Just a terrific film about like siblings, and a cartoon salon movie. I don't think we recognize them enough. It's an Irish studio.
Yeah.
And their films are just it's just so emotionally engaging. I don't want to name any more Ghibli, but
yeah, we've talked about
basically any Ghibli film, honestly. Just take it at that.
Nazca, Totoro, Grave of the Fireflies,
Wind Rises,
Ocean Waves,
Mononoke,
Spirit Away.
You know the list.
Castles in the Sky. You know it. We did a whole episode on that already. Cowboy Bebop the movie. That is also some of the most insane action sequence I've ever seen, and that's all hand drawn. Beautiful film. Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. Got a shout out the DC animated movies. That's big.
Under the Red Hood, man.
Under the Red Hood's good. Yurisi Yatsura, Beautiful Dreamer. If you want me to talk more about that, go to our 80s episode. Pokemon, the Pokemon movies. Pokemon, the first movie is insanely good. Initial D, the third stage, insanely good movie. Interstellar 55555, Daft Punk, need I say more?
Oh, Interstellar 505, yeah.
And movies adapted from cartoons. Brandon already mentioned the SpongeBob movie. The Invader Zim, Enter the Florpus is a really good one. Under Fist, that's a movie from Billy and Mandy. I thought it was amazing. Foster Son for Imaginary Friends, House of Blues, super good. Last one I want to talk about. The best dinosaur movie from 1993. We're back. A Dinosaur Story, baby. That movie's incredible. I love that one. John Goodman's a T-Rex. He's great. Chris, list of movies.
Okay, cool. The ones that I want to list out that has been mentioned yet are The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Batman: The Mask of the Phantasm.
Yes.
The Simpsons movie, because technically that is 2D,
yeah.
even though they add shadows to try and make it look 3D, which I hate that they do that in these like movie adaptations of shows. The next
have a bigger budget.
Yeah, true. My final four are movies that are technically 3D or or another animation form, but use 2D elements, kind of like how we talked about like Spiderverse, for instance. Kung Fu Panda, the matte paintings in the back are all 2D animated or
just
hand-drawn.
2D drawn.
Suzume, also Shinkai always uses 2D and 3D and meshes them beautifully.
Yeah.
I talked about this movie once before, Life in Transition. It's a movie by John R. Dilworth, who's the guy who made Courage the Cowardly Dog, who's also is very much a good movie to look at or series to look at for animation.
Mm-hmm.
And also the style is very reminiscent of what's his name? Surrealist. There's a surrealist artist. It's gonna
Dali.
Yeah, Salvador Dali.
Yeah.
And the last one I want to shout out, because Life in Transition is a stop motion 2D animated film. I'm gonna shout out my final pick. It's also a stop motion with some 2D. Bob the Builder, The Knights of Camelot, which I was reminded of because Brandon talked about Camelot earlier, and I thought of this. Anyway,
with that,
there you go.
Enjoy some 2D animated film, guys. Animation is cinema. Okay,
It is cinema.
I'm getting more sick of people saying that than people like discrediting animation. I'm like, we need to go back to hating on animation again. Because they'll pull up the fucking like Trolls World Tour and they'll say animation is cinema, guys. Okay, I'm like, all right, we get it. Del Toro, let Del Toro just say that. And then we'll just go watch the animated films. How about that? So let us know in the comments below what your favorite 2D animated film is. Let us know what your Subway order is in the comments below as well.
Mine's the best.
Yours is vile. Yours is the Grave of the Fireflies of Subway sandwiches.
I don't think you should compare the.
It's a darkness upon humanity. It's so sad. I don't know that'll be it for us, for the three of us for a while, guys. Chris, any parting thoughts before you go to Hong Kong for a while?
Fuck.
No, he hates you guys. Let's go.
Keep watching movies.
Yeah.
Oh, Alex Knight, is it McKnight? McDonald's McKnight?
Alex Knight. Oh my god.
Was Alex Knight the one who asked
Loyal
for
listener.
Hong Kong cinema?
Yeah.
Was that him?
Yes.
Alex, when we come back, I will try and get these guys to do a Hong Kong episode.
You know what? Let's make that a promise. Our first episode when Chris comes back, let's do Hong Kong films. How about that? I feel like we're all a lot more versed in Hong Kong cinema. Freaking deal.
Yeah.
Sign it.
Deal.
Put it in stone. When Chris gets back, we'll do that. But yeah, just get ready for a few more, just a couple of hiatuses and a few episodes. Maybe it'll just be me and Brandon. Maybe it'll be me, Brandon, and a guest. Maybe it'll just be Brandon. Who knows? Yeah, he's waving right now. Let's see what he'll rant about for an hour. I bet he's got something to say. He's been scheming for ideas, right? Yeah.
So otters, we love them as aquatic creatures.
Yeah.
In this lovely environment.
Yeah. Tell us more.
I got charged at by a
You
skunk yesterday.
You should do like an Animal Planet commentary or something.
You got charged?
I got charged by a skunk yesterday. It charged me. It charged at me.
Oh,
It's scary.
okay, cool.
The life of Brandon. The life aquatic.
Yeah, you'll hear all about it on his solo episodes, guys.
Mm.
All right, bye.